Truth number 4. Obscurials are real, they are growing in number and in power. They are being created within the United States and elsewhere because of our political climate of intolerance and danger, and they are being controlled by people with ill intent. We learn more about the American wizarding community in the 1920s in J.K. Rowling's latest historical documentary about fantastic beasts. Specifically, this is the first mention we hear about a condition that affects young witches and wizards who have tried to repress their magical nature. When children consciously repress their magical nature, a parasite called an Obscurus latches onto them and feeds on their magic. In the 20s, there was no known treatment for the fatal disease. While the parasite and host both lived, these children would be referred to as Obscurials. Unfortunately, the Obscurus almost always causes the death of the Obscurial before the age of 10, with a few notable exceptions, those being Credence from the very same historical documentary, and Ariana Dumbledore from the Good Books, who survived until age 14 when she died by friendly fire from a wizard duel. We have seen in the historical documentary about fantastic beasts that Grindelwald is obsessed with finding the Obscurial wreaking havoc in New York City, and later, in controlling an Obscurus, when Newt mentions he was able to split the Obscurus he has in his trunk from the Obscurial who had passed away. We imagine Grindelwald first realized the true power of an Obscurial when he first experienced one's true power. Ariana Dumbledore must have manifested some truly amazing, although uncontrolled powers during and before the fateful fight between Grindelwald and the Dumbledore brothers. Unfortunately, as this was also the fight during which Ariana was tragically killed, Grindelwald was left with a lot of questions about her condition. Still, he takes note of this potential source of untapped power. Another watcher has given a convincing argument that an Obscurus is a predecessor to a dementor. The evidence is in fact quite staggering. I'll provide the link to his full argument below, but in short, both have similar appearances, both seem to make the place around them colder, and both of them involve negative emotions at their very core. It wouldn't be surprising to find, in a release of a new historical documentary by J.K. Rowling, that after either Newt or perhaps Grindelwald perfect the separation of Obscurus and Obscurial, we find the rise of what are known as dementors in the wizarding world. We can only assume that Grindelwald found it too hard to control an Obscurus, but that the transformation from Obscurus to a dementor created a creature that could be harnessed and bent toward Grindelwald's plan. We know how Obscurials are created, but we currently possess conflicting information on how dementors are created. It appears that dementors grow in number when a large amount of mold is in the environment. Barty Crouch Sr. described dementor breeding territory as a kind of mist, and J.K. Rowling referred to dementors breeding in a space of fungus and decay. We have seen that the recent rash of hurricanes, made worse by global warming and worse still because of the lack of repair and cleanup, will lead to a proliferation of toxic mold in all of the recovery areas. Make no mistake, this is by design. People have been put in place and bought off to refuse funding for any kind of repair, rebuilding, or mitigation of these disasters. That's where the mold and decay come from, as even nomads realize that areas that have been ravaged by floods and storms are breeding grounds for waterborne illnesses and infections. What they don't realize is that they are now also breeding grounds for dementors, dementors that will soon be part of Grindelwald's army. The next step in his plan is to use the very same people who prevent hurricane recovery to create a culture of fear. Why? To stop us from taking action against the large dementor breeding territory, to create a new batch of Obscurials. As just a small example of how they are lulling us into an inactive, fatalist mass, it has been noted elsewhere that the young adult dystopias, whose teenage, often female hero is the catalyst of a movement that brings a corrupt government to its knees, has been replaced by a new kind of protagonist. A nihilistic, fatalistic protagonist who ends up killing themselves because the dystopia that they live in has brought them down. Look to the popularity of 13 Reasons Why, or to the storyline in The 100, where a group of teenagers choose to kill themselves rather than run to a bomb shelter before a nuke goes off. The instruments of control in the mass media and in politics are using the emotion-controlling powers of the dementors to create a culture of inaction and fatalism, which we escape to through our books and TV shows, which we justify by being outraged by a new distraction every day. The media may want you to believe this is not by design. I'm here to tell you that this is not an error due to one or two incompetent buffoons getting into positions of power. Grindelwald is not simply profiting off this unfortunate circumstance. No, this is a systematic play by those who profit off the creation of Obscurials and dementors, which they can then command for their own goals. Pun intended, but you can see how we now have a perfect storm of conditions leading to a rise in Obscurials and dementors. However, it would be remiss of me to end the video here. I'd just be adding to the fatalism, outrage, and inaction. So, are you ready? Not to take the blue pill or the red pill, because these are dementors that we're talking about. Instead, have a piece of chocolate and let's go. Let's take one small step at a time, stretch those muscles out of inaction, and together we can decrease the dementor breeding ground. First, let me explain some general long-term goals. We must fight for policy that doesn't reward rebuilding on a floodplain. We must encourage rebuilding and rehousing in better, safer areas than before. We must not let the rebuilding process stagnate, and we must clean up rotting debris. Now for some short-term goals that you can do. I've just written a letter to my congressional representative, which you can see here. I'll add the name and address afterwards. The card simply says, J.K. Rowling has said that dementors grow like fungus where there is decay. Puerto Ricans do not deserve to be overrun with dementors. Provide Puerto Rico with adequate disaster relief funding and increase Medicaid funding. So, nomad doctors may not know how to treat dementor attacks, but they can treat other waterborne illnesses and infections. Plus, enough magical folks should be on staff to help with the dementor attacks while still avoiding detection. I won't give a list of your MACUSA representatives because I'm already risking a lot as it is, But if you're part of the magical community like me, you already know what to do. However, not all magical folk might know that they can also contact their congressperson. Yes, you do have a no-mage representative as well, so let me show you how. Go to the link you see here on the screen. You will then see both U.S. senators and U.S. representatives on that page. To find a senator's contact information, click on U.S. senators, then find the senators for your state. After you click on their biography, their address should be available, probably at the bottom of the page. To find a U.S. representative's information, instead, click on U.S. representatives from that original page. Then, enter your zip code in the top right box that says Find Your Representative. Again, their address should be available at the bottom of their biography. Be sure to find a no-mage friend to check whether you are providing proper postage, and then leave the envelope inside that small box that you see in your front yard. If you prefer to call instead, that's great. That contact information is also available in the same places where you found the mailing address. If you happen to have the resources, please also consider a monetary donation. One group that I like is the Hispanic Federation. I'll give the link here, but you can find your own preferred group. There are quite a number. Well, there you have it, folks. I hope I have helped you step outside of the mass distraction matrix, out of the dementor-ridden stupor we find ourselves in, if even for just a moment. Do me a favor and help your friend swallow the chocolate pill too, and join us on this journey to rid the world of dementors and their breeding grounds.